All right, so welcome to the podcast. Today we're just going to be talking about business in general and what it's like to start your own business and what that path looks like for yourself. And wherever you are on that path, whether you're, entrepreneur that's been doing business for a long time or you're someone that's just thinking about it, I think you'll get a lot of value out of this, whether it's remembering how it felt at the very beginning or what it feels like right now at the very beginning as far as owning your own business and those risks and those things that are associated with it. So with this podcast, we're going to be talking with one of my really good friends, family members. His name's Kyle Swallow, and he has been working with me throughout this last year. Started with just doing sales and then evolved into doing more management things inside the company, and then going into like just managing accounts and things like that, and then slowly transitioned into what we know now as the Night Owl Academy, which is going from an applicant to a franchise owner and us teaching people in the academy each phase of the process of how to become a successful franchise owner at the end of that. And so with that, we're just going to talk with Kyle about his journey, about where he's been inside that and how he's felt inside that process. Just a little bit about Kyle. Kyle's been in my life for about 14 years or so now. He married my cousin 14 years ago, and I was pretty young at that time. I was like 20, 21, and Kyle was and still is one of my biggest mentors when it comes to just being the guy, the man. He's always been the guy that people look at and look up to just inherently. He has a lot of charisma. He's one of those people that are just easy to like. And so he recruited me to do door-to-door sales when I was a little bit younger because he was running teams, and I learned a lot about how important that skill is, just how to talk to people, how to read people's body language, how to present myself in the best way possible so that you have a good chance of people being receptive to you. Kyle moved to Boise about 6 years ago, and in that time when Kyle moved, Kyle's always been a really big hunter and is really successful at it. And I wanted to join him, and so we started hunting together, and in that process, we would talk about a bunch of different things. We didn't talk about business in general, just because a lot of times when someone isn't doing what you're doing as far as entrepreneurship, it's just really, really hard to relate to them. And with that process, it's difficult because there's a lot of people in your life that want to understand and they want to be a part of it, but it's just so difficult to talk to them just because it's hard to explain what it is that's going on. And if you're in that process, you 100% know. And so I didn't talk to Kyle a ton about Night Owl just because it just wasn't something that, that we discussed a lot, but we did talk about just business and life and goals and things like as we hunt. And I've seen him go from, different sales positions that he's always been really successful at, just kind of searching for something that's a little bit more residual and has a little bit more longevity to it, just going from different positions that would give him a lot more each time. And eventually ended up talking with me just about opportunities that potentially we have with Night Owl and working together, and it's worked out really good so far. And so I wanted to just open up the discussion with Kyle about what has it been like for you going from door-to-door sales to, insurance to other things, and eventually kind of ending up in the realm of entrepreneurship and, business ownership, and then like figuring out that this is something that really makes sense for me and my family and just you personally.
I think not to go backwards, but I think, to mention some of our discussions and things that like goals you mentioned when we would go hunt, there's a lot that you learn about somebody when you hunt with them and when you do really, really, really hard things. And hunting how we hunt is extremely challenging. And Stetson has always been like such an amazing example of just getting it done without complaining. And so I only mention that because as fast forward to when this became like an option or an opportunity, there was no doubt that I wanted to be involved. And actually this goes back even a little bit before this, but I've wanted to be involved in things with Stetson, not knowing that this is what it would become, because of the person that he has become, the person that he is, but definitely the person that he's grown into. And I've got to witness pretty firsthand over the last 8 years, although not talking about business. Like, I would know he'd struggle because he wouldn't sleep the night before, but yet I'd still be picking him up in the truck and we'd be driving up the mountain. I wouldn't hear a negative thing, but we wouldn't talk about business, but I knew he just had a rough go, but I wouldn't hear a negative thing. We would be hiking, biking, 8 miles, packing out a bunch of meat, and there was never a negative thing. So like, as this opportunity presented itself, like, I absolutely wanted to be involved because I knew that, like, one, Stetson would be an awesome, like, partner type, mentor, leader, helpful in this process, but it was just an easy decision to make because of the previous experiences we had had. So I guess I think salespeople trick themselves into thinking that they're entrepreneurs because they're not like working, they have more freedom with their schedule. They make more money than a lot of people. And so I think I kind of fell into that trap really early on. Although the sales things that I did and sales skills I developed were like imperative and crucial and extremely helpful and have got me to where I am right now. I think I always thought I was an entrepreneur, but like I was just a fake, like wannabe entrepreneur. Mm-hmm. Didn't really understand what all of that entailed. And so,
because sales, I mean, it does give you a lot of the things that entrepreneurship gives you. It gives you freedom. A lot of time you have a lot of freedom with your time. It gives you a higher pay to your work. So if you're a really hard worker, you can crush it and you can get paid a ton. And it gives you this idea of creating your own income. Yeah. And like, so it is like very entrepreneur-ish. It's just like,
it's also very far from actually being an entrepreneur. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think I fell into that trap. And so in knowing that I just wanted to work with Stetson, and there was a conversation we had with a friend of ours, an acquaintance of ours, that actually, which I don't know if I've ever shared this with you. I think I probably did, but he's in the process of trying to like sell his company. And Stetson and I literally, in all the years we've known him, never talked about like the contracts that he has, but it came up. And so then I like started asking questions, and then I was just like kind of blown away. And then that's where kind of the inception of like me wanting really to be involved more quickly. And from a sales aspect though, like really kind of in my mind, like started because I started asking questions and it was just like, oh, this industry's freaking crazy. Like, it's awesome.
Yeah. And that's something that talked about in another podcast of just that the service industry is just this like gold mine that people really don't think about, especially in janitorial, where you can go and sell these contracts for a lot of money and they're really easy to sell. People just want them. And then you have this residual income that's coming in that you can hire out.
And not to, this probably isn't where you were going with it, but just speaking on like the sales aspect of it, my experience, and Stetson always will like, he'll mention to me that it's not this easy for everybody. And it's not that it was super easy for me, but it felt as if anytime I would go in and talk to these contracts or these decision makers, that it feels like they had never been talked to. They'd never been approached. Someone come and try to compete for their business. And so getting their attention and getting them to listen and creating a difference between you and who they're currently using was so easy.
Yeah. And I think like, especially in this industry, the bar of entry is just so low that most of the people in the industry, you're either like really, really, really high up there and you have huge sales teams, or it's you and your wife, going out and cleaning buildings on the weekends. Yeah. And so like those people that are like at the bottom where they just have a few contracts, it's them and their wife and their kids and stuff going out and cleaning, they're never going into companies to solicit their business. And the big companies don't have to, because it's all from referrals, or it's just a name. So people contact them based off of a web search or like a name that they have just because they're nationwide or whatever it might be. And so for us to go in there and have a little bit of sales charisma and just be able to talk to somebody is like so like leagues above anybody else that's in the industry that's why it's easy.
Yeah, like I had no janitorial experience prior to going in and talking to the first. I mean, Stetson kind of mentioned some things, and he gave me like this little script that if I was making calls that would be helpful. And I'm very much a face-to-face guy, and so I literally just started stopping into businesses. And knowing that that's how he did it when he first started, I was blown away that I knew literally nothing. And even still, like I know what I need to know now, but like realizing what the voids in the market are, which are really simple, but not like I never talk about cleaning with them because I don't want to set the bar high for our employees. Yeah. That makes it hard for them. And so it's just talking about things that I know that they care about, but also things that we care about and do really well, which communication. And I mean, there's a plethora of things, but there's simple things that other companies don't do. And so I think like what got me here was always thinking I don't think I cared so much about like wanting ownership or like be able to call the shots necessarily or caring about that. Because I do think I'm like a super solid number two, and I've like accepted that in most cases or in like pretty much all cases. But I think like the right opportunity never really presented itself. Like even though I've been searching, I think for years, like as stuff would come up, I would like explore those things. But I think it was a combination of the right person, the right people, meaning you and like Night Owl, the right opportunity or industry. And then with a company that like has the reputation and has been around for as long as Night Owl has. So like all came together like perfect timing. And then diving into the sales opened up more opportunities, meaning like Stetson mentioned management. And so like this academy kind of developed accidentally, but it was because like I was going through like what normally an entrepreneur would by them, but I wasn't doing it alone, right? Mm-hmm. Like having someone like Stetson being like the support or helper telling me what to do. Yeah. As stuff came up, it made sense.
I think like with it too, what's been interesting on my side is like as we've introduced you to these potential problems or these things that are required to own a business or at least like a successful business, and things that I've learned over the last 8 years, watching you go through those steps has been interesting for me because a lot of them I forgot. You know, a lot of them you forget that you had this hard thing that happened, you know, year one or year two or whatever it is. And then reintroducing that through you and seeing like, oh yeah, that was something that I struggled with, or, oh yeah, that was something that I, thought. And so with that, what have been some challenges, whether it's, now, that you have your own franchise or when you were in the process of learning, to have your own franchise in the Night Academy, what were some of those struggles that kind of surprised you that you thought like, oh, this will be a slam dunk or this is easy? What are some of those things that, really was a curveball where you're just like, oh, I thought I was good at this, but I'm really not?
Anybody, like, as I say this, anybody that knows me would probably like not agree, but I think I thought I was a good problem solver or active problem solver, but like I really wasn't at all until I got to watch. So I think that's something going into starting my own that if I wouldn't have like learned how to do that better, would have been a significant struggle right now. And so like an example, which is just ridiculous, like our very first contract, my very first contract that I got with you, the theater, and just like the dumbest thing. So you were gone at the UFC fight for the night. And one thing that I like really appreciate is that Stetson allowed me to, like, you knew, maybe you forgot the struggles, but like you knew there would be struggles. And I was also I didn't want to ask. And so I knew I wanted to figure these things out without bugging Stetson or so like you're gone the first night and then you were planning to come the next day, which is a Sunday, to help. And like we had people sweeping carpet, and it's not because I thought we should be sweeping carpet, but it's like there was 7 employees there first day, and there was no systems that I had created, and so to watch you come in and just be like, that's done, and that's not what you were saying, but you were like you observed for a little bit, minutes, maybe half an hour as you kind of worked on things, and then it was just like boom, 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 and changed everything that we did, and then it was like super streamlined from then on. And so learning that, I think was challenging for me because it's different with every contract.
Yeah. And I think that was like a good lesson for both of us. I think for you too, because before I left for the UFC, I knew that we were starting and you said, hey, I'm going to handle it. I got all this. And I had sent you, like, I said, hey, if I was starting this contract, this is what I would do.
Yeah.
This is who I would put. This is like where I would do it. This is exactly what I would do. And I think you saw it. I don't think you appreciated it at the time because you're just like, oh, how hard could it be? And so then when I came in and a lot of the changes that we made that first day of things that you just didn't have experience with and systems that I knew worked were kind of outlined in that original thing that I sent you.
Yeah.
And so, and I knew as soon as I came in and saw how stuff was going that you didn't really like dive into that email that I had sent you saying like, hey, this is a system that I would do.
And I think I agree. I don't think it was a matter of like not appreciating. I think it was a combination. There was a lot of things, but I wouldn't have known they would have been things until I was in that situation. So for the fact having 7 employees my first day dealing, but then also most of our buildings, a lot of them have 1 employee. So you can take them through our like 4-day training process and be involved, where now I'm like trying to somehow train 7 people at the same time, which was garbage, right?
Yeah.
And so then I think it was more just chaotic. And so like, even though I had read it, probably I definitely thought this is going to be easier than what this outline shows. So I don't think I definitely didn't study it. I gave it a glance, and then the second I got into the building, employees start showing up. I'm like blackout. I'm like, what the freak? And then we're just like panic mode, just clean,
just trying to get it done. Yeah, and I think that like with that, it goes to show kind of just like experience solves all problems. 99% of the time, and like you had a really hard thing to do at the start, because most entrepreneurs, like their introduction to employees is like you said, like 1 or 2, and you're training one of them, and then you're learning how to train one employee, and then you introduce your second one, you've learned from your first one, and like you going into that first contract and having a night where we have 7 people at one time. I knew that you had ran teams. I knew that you like it wasn't a case of leadership or anything like that, but like it is something that you learn over time as far as like, how do I best understand getting people's best out of them? And a lot of times people will only live up to what you give them, you know? And so like, if you aren't being good at understanding the tasks and the roles that are associated with a certain job, it's really hard to give people really good direction for them to be successful.
Yeah.
And so that first day, you not knowing anything translates to everybody not knowing anything. And then that translates to people usually like quitting, because like if they don't have a direction or have a directive, it's really hard for them to want to stay at the job.
And I think it's so very apparent when somebody doesn't know what they're doing or feel like, and it wasn't that, how hard is it to clean a toilet? It wasn't like that I didn't know what I was doing. It was just that I didn't have a plan on how to give people the attention during the day, or like even maybe staggering people coming in throughout the day would have solved that problem, or things that I could have hidden the fact that I didn't know. I could have resolved the chaos issue knowing now, like having gone through it, but like you don't know until you don't know until you've gone through it. And so now like I would never do that again. Yeah. Like that way anyway.
Yeah. And that's just every single thing that we do in entrepreneurship. And this is something like advice that I give to Kyle, like as he's going through this process, is just like trying to figure out the processes that you're going to continue on. Like if you figure out something, write it down and put it into a training manual, put it into something, and make that repeatable so it's not locked away in your brain. That like, and that's something that I struggled with and didn't really know the value with until way later, in business, of like, I knew exactly how to train someone really well for them to be retained and for them to be successful in a job. But translating that to your managers, and your managers translating that to your team members as you get bigger and bigger and bigger, is like a task that's really, really hard. And unless you're actively writing that down and creating these processes and creating systems that are repeatable, like your business is kind of bottlenecked by you know, and
which is something that has been awesome over the last year. Like you've developed like these processes and these things that allow that prevents any bottlenecks. And so now as I get a contract and I'm able to step back and like take a deep breath before panicking and going into that contract, I'm able to take these things, and this is like the academy, like this is why it's awesome. And why I think anybody that gets involved with it will be successful is because the playbook or whatever you want to call it is already there. So as long as you're just implementing these things like as foundational like principles or foundational processes, no matter how big you grow, like you can support that. We already had this conversation. Like I just went through all this and I'm telling Stetson, like I have a few contracts right now and we've actually only been in business since the 11th technically of March and it's the 26th. So, but like a few contracts already and part of which were as part of the process, like that kind of granted to me, but being paranoid about payroll, being paranoid about all these things I haven't had to be paranoid about before, wanting to create a business savings so that payroll never becomes an issue. I'm telling Stetson, dude, I think I'm just going to work these accounts by myself or whatever. And immediately he was like, dude, you're not. He's like, if you want to, and you might want to just say what you said, but basically it just was like, you need to prepare for the growth right now. Like if you are trying to, you're selling every day, you're out prospecting, I guess, every day, you're doing these contracts at night, there's going to come a point where you're going to bottleneck yourself already because these contracts are going to they're going to actualize, you're going to acquire these contracts, but then you haven't been hiring and putting people in place. And so it's like, I already knew these things. Like I already knew these things because we've already talked about these things and it's such a basic principle, but it's like, okay, like I just had to accept the fact, like, okay, what's a couple months of making less money again? Who cares? Because it wasn't even about me making money. It was about the paranoia of the business. But still, he was like, you got to prepare for the growth right now. So like, go hire people right now, put people in the building, and you're going to grow. But if you're not prepared for the growth, you're not going to grow.
Yeah. And I think that like comes down to the principle, like you have to have the room to grow. And so like, if your time is dictated into all these different things, then your business has no room. It's in you've gotten big into a small room. And unless you move yourself into a bigger room, there's no way of you growing. It's like a goldfish only grows to the size of its tank. And being able to put yourself into a bigger tank and into a bigger tank and into a bigger tank. And I think that all comes down to like timing it wisely as well. Like you don't want to immediately jump into the biggest tank that you can because like you're going to get eaten by a bigger fish. Yeah. But as soon as you feel yourself becoming a big fish in this small tank, then it's time to freaking jump into that bigger one. And sometimes it's worth it to jump into that bigger tank early so that your growth is faster. And that's really hard to do when you're comfortable. Yeah. Like I'm the giant in this small tank and it's easy and it feels good. And like you're making more money than you ever made. And it feels like it's just sustainable and great. But the reality is that those next contracts won't come. Those bigger contracts won't come. The next steps of business won't come until you allow yourself to be scared again in that bigger tank.
And like the one thing also about the academy that just, I know what I'm personally capable of from a sales aspect, at least to a degree because of what I've already done like last year. And so knowing that I want those goals to be the same within my own company, last year, what was really eye-opening was like there would be get a sale but then it would take a month to where I couldn't do anything because I'm so involved in that contract. Mm-hmm. And so that bottlenecking would occur. Anyway, I guess the goals being that they're the same now, like I don't want that bottlenecking to occur. So like if I'm not putting those people in place immediately, then like the growth, I won't be able to be a big fish even in a small freaking pond.
And I think the important part to like recognize too is that you're not starting from ground zero. Like you've gone through the lessons that you've had to learn to be worthy enough for that bigger tank. And so if you were starting from day one, I would have told you, hey, work these accounts as much as you possibly can and go out there and work all of it yourself and continue to do that for 3 or 4 months and like really, really understand the systems and really like create those processes. And if you had not worked with me or had not been part of like the Night Owl Academy type idea, I wouldn't have encouraged you to like hire those people immediately and go out and sell because you wouldn't have earned that right yet.
Yeah.
And so if someone's just starting and, they're thinking that they want to jump into a bigger pond, like you need to really get to that spot where you are actually a big enough fish to go into that new pond.
Yeah. Like something that I think this goes back to like the salesman in me and why it was always hard for me to like actually start a business or be involved in business, because salesmen, I think a lot of salesmen are looking for shortcuts, and not shortcuts, actual ways that they can make more money and just submit it and forget it. Make a sale, never have to think about it again. That's super easy. And the reality is like their shortcuts do not exist. And so going off what you said, the only reason I'm comfortable going in, trying to do the same, duplicate what I did last year from a sales perspective, is because I already paid the price through the academy throughout the year. Like there were 3 days straight where I would not sleep. Like I'm not even kidding. No sleep and I could have, but I also wanted to sell during the day so I could continue. So like I did that to myself, but it was also knowing that if I want this thing, whatever this goal is, there's other things that have to happen to be able to deserve that. Otherwise it can't happen or you'll fail.
One thing that I wanted to talk to you about as well is just like you finding your like why going into owning your own business. And with the Freedom Forge, like a lot of the thing that we talk about on the podcast is just us wanting freedom in our own lives. And that's why I started my businesses. That's why a lot of people start business in general, is to try and get more freedom. I think there's two thought processes behind starting a business, whether it's I want to just make more money. I'm trying to become that billionaire, that multimillionaire, like whatever it might be. Like really hungry for money, or I'm really hungry for freedom. Or both. I think for me, it's always been a freedom aspect where I want to create a way for my kids to not have to worry about money. I can always be there for them. I can be at the soccer games. I can be at the swim meets. I can be at those things that, are valuable, where I'm not required to be anywhere else with doing anything else.
For me, I don't think it was so much the freedom, because I've kind of had that freedom with being involved in sales forever. I've really, basically since I was 21, created my own schedule to a degree, with exception to summer sales, because you're on the doors, all summer. But I think I would lose, not even kidding you, I would lose sleep at night after starting to have kids. So I've got 3 kids, ages 6 to 2. But I would lose sleep at night knowing that I would have to do this until I die. Like I'm setting up things that kind of preparing for this retirement idea, which I've always hated the idea of it. So I think a couple things is, one, I've always liked the idea to not call it 40. I never really had an age, but not feeling like I have to work after a certain age so I can be involved for the real freedom. Like I've been subscribing to fake freedom. Like I can do what I want when I want, but I know in the back of my head I have to go bust my butt tomorrow and sell, or I'm not going to make money. And I would lose sleep thinking, what am I doing with my life? Like money was fine, so it wasn't to make more. Like it was definitely the ceiling is different. So there's no ceiling in sales, but there kind of is. But like with a business, you can grow to it really whatever the industry, like whatever you can. So I think 2 things. One, competition. Like I think that's been a big part of it. So yes, the freedom, yes, wanting more money. But for me, as you get older and you're not involved in sports anymore, you've got, as men, you got like 2 things. You go to the gym and like fake compete with other people at the gym, or you like your brothers or friends, and for summertime to take your shirts off or whatever, which I last year I didn't go to the gym one time because I couldn't, because of what we were doing. But it's that, or like monetarily, and it's not even like I'm telling those people that I'm competing with them, but I want to be the best person I can freaking be for my kids. I know if I'm not stretching myself to the max, then I'm not becoming that person. I'm not an example to them. And entrepreneurship, I've learned, real entrepreneurship, you are forced to be, you have to be that person. And you only become that person by these experiences, by these 3 days of not sleeping. And the fact is that's temporary. Like, I will survive. Like, I heard so many times from my wife, like, you need to chill out or whatever. And it's like, no, I'm not going to die. Like, I'm not going to die if I don't sleep for 3 days, I hope. Yeah. But point is, I think competition was a huge driving factor. And then realizing, when I say legacy, I don't mean that I care about how I'm remembered necessarily, but like, I want, kind of like what you said, like, I will always make my kids work. I will never give them anything, but I want to be able to do that. Yeah. I don't, like, happiness, what's the saying, like, money never created happiness, but I definitely believe, like, the lack of money creates a lot of freaking problems. So, like, I don't want to think about money. And so it is a monetary thing, but I don't have, like, a number. I don't care to be a billionaire. I don't care to be, so I think competition, realizing that the actual ceiling, but like competition and knowing I can really create something for real. Like, I've slept. When I sleep, like, I've slept great because I don't have this little demon in the back of my mind being like, you're going to have to do this till you die. Like, but this has been fun, and I want to do things like this or build things because it's actually mine. Yeah. Where before it wasn't.
And I think, like, with it too, you can kind of see the compounding effect of your efforts. You know, for sure. The way that I describe it is like when you work for somebody else, you are essentially putting money into a checking account. Yeah. You know, and then when you're working for yourself, you're putting money into a high yield savings account. Yeah. And with that, like, every hour that you work and things, it's like a lot of times you just don't see the return on that investment for a very long time, and those hours and those days of not sleeping and the time that you've spent in that hard necessary mindset are all banking those hours into hours that will give you freedom in the future. And that's, I think, the biggest difference in my mind as far as, like, owning a business to sales and to everything else is that those hours are spent in a way that's going to give you dividends, you know, in the future. And everything in entrepreneurship is earned. Like, any position that you hire, any position that you are asking somebody else to do for your business always has to be earned in the way of, like, that you've done it and that you've done it to a way where you can create systems that other people can do it well. And that creates so much sacrifice and so much problem solving that's where most people fail in the idea of earning that right to have someone else do something. And there's so many, like, businesses nowadays, and they're so enticing, and people go and make a lot of money doing them that are kind of a quick way of making money. But even those, like, there's still, you know, endless hours of doubting yourself and endless hours of really, like, thinking, is this going to work? But, like, with the service industry business, what I like about it the most, and anything that's more physical or, you know, product based, is you can kind of see that direct influence of your work, you know, where every hour that you put in, you can kind of see and analyze and imagine that return that's eventually going to come, where, like, with the digital product or online things, the initial time spent, it's probably way harder. I haven't been successful in that yet, but it's probably way harder to see that return in the time that you're putting into it.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, and something that was immediately different and all of these things. So Stetson, you outlined our relationship from the beginning, where maybe I was a mentor to you, but I think one thing and why this works so well, and I don't know yet, because, like, I'm not a successful entrepreneur yet. Like, I'm 3 weeks into actually doing it, right? But, like, I don't feel that, and you might disagree, but I think there's no ego here, like, at all. And so coming into it for me, I immediately, anything that Stetson that you would say was God. Like, I took his gospel, and it's like, well, I tried to anyway. And just realizing I don't know anything, but I need to know things. And so it made the learning process for me a lot easier. Like, I didn't go into it thinking I knew what I was doing. Like, I knew I had sales skills And after talking to the first few people, I was like, okay, this part of it's going to be easy. But back to what you were saying is one of the things that you would say, you mentioned like you're working now for like how much, I can't remember exactly what you had said, but it was during one of those long stretches at the theater where I was there for 35 days straight. So one, I had to be, because I was paranoid about people not showing up and it not getting done and disappointing the customer, but also you can't, like, credibility with your employees. Like, I need to be able to be in a couple states away and get a phone call and be able to answer them where the heck the toilet seat covers are. Like, I need to know anything and everything about those buildings. Point is like, during that time you had said something about, imagine how much money you're actually making per hour. Fast forward 3 years from now, and when you haven't been in that building in 2 years, like, what was this time worth to you? Like, now, is it $1,000 an hour? Is it, because it's not like what I was getting paid for that at that time, at all, or even close. And so, like, immediately, knowing that what we were trying to do together, not what I'm trying to do, I don't go into a building thinking anything about like an hourly thing or what I'm going to get paid that month from it. It's like, by me being here for the next 4 days with this employee ensures that I may not have to step into this building for months, but I'll be getting paid, the margins are very impressive with this industry. So it's like the time I'm spending, means a lot to that employee. Like, it's cleaning a few things in an office space, super easy. Yeah. But the fact that I'm taking 4 days to train them, they don't feel thrown to the wolves. They know what they're doing. And so if they don't hear from me for a week, it's okay. And so anyway, like the value in it's just completely different. So anyway, I don't mean to ramble, but just the fact that the time that you're spending in this moment or this struggle, like, the dividends that it will pay if it's done properly is going to be enormous.
Yeah, and I think that's what you just said is like a really good concept to think about, and something that's really important is like almost like the more initial time that you spend on something and the more value that you give it, the greater the value is that the output of that is going to be. So like, with that idea that team member that you're training, spending those 4 days with them and, really analyzing, okay, how do I help this person become the best that they can be in this building, and showing them that what that looks like, and building that relationship with them does create that environment where that person could be with you for 4 or 5, 6 years. And, like in my example, there's people that have worked with me for, over 5 years now that I haven't had to step into their building for 4 or 5 years, And so, those initial hours that you spend training them really allows you to cash in those dividends in the future.
And something, not to get in, because I'm sure we'll talk about the academy on like other occasions, but it's just like the things that we focus on, like even just doing that creates a culture of actually caring about the employees. And so it's like, they can feel so quickly if you're just some boss or you're like, you care. And you get, I don't think people should be loyal to us or to their employer necessarily, but it creates loyalty by just caring about them.
I think that it separates you from other people that they've worked for.
For sure.
And I think that that's the biggest part of like retention is at this time, like, unless it's their first job, like they've had other jobs before you and they've had really good experiences and they probably had bad experiences. And like, you just want them to know that like, hey, I'm going to be one of the good experiences. And a lot of times, kind of the devil, idea works in your favor as a business owner or as an employer, is like, if you treat somebody well, they know what it feels like to not be treated well, And so like, why would I go and get paid $1 more here to potentially not get treated well when I can stay here and do a job that I know I can be successful at, that I know I'm going to be treated well. And so it just breeds that loyalty. But also I think like a big thing for me is I just want people to know that I want them to be as successful as they can. And I want them to have all the opportunities that they want, and with that is like, maybe like working for me is a stepping stone, or maybe like, you know, your time and the value that you need from me is only 3 months or 6 months or a year, whatever that is. But as soon as you get that value that you want from me, you've provided me with so much value. Mm-hmm. You know, just being a great team member and working with us, you've already paid that value back in me tenfold, you know? And so like, I hope that whoever leaves the company and has had a good experience with us is leaving with the idea that they got value. They got value from me. Not just monetarily as far as like their pay, but they're leaving with skills, and they're leaving with, you know, things that will benefit them in, you know, their next job that they're going to take in the future. We're going to just wrap up for today. I know that Kyle is going to be a really frequent person on the podcast, just because of what he's going through and the experiences that he's going to have over the next year, 2 years of growth and hardships with employees and different things that, you know, he didn't experience in the time that he worked with me and, you know, learning in the academy. And also just checking in on things that Kyle's going to teach me, you know, from experiences and things that he's figured out that I still haven't figured out. And so I'm excited to see where this podcast goes. I'm excited to, you know, hear from people that listen and have feedback. I think that every time I talk about business, especially with people that are entrepreneurs and people that are really interested in the idea of creating something on their own and the value that brings, I learn something from everybody that I talk to. And I think that ego part of like our relationship and other relationships, what I've found is like most entrepreneurs are so like, they have to be confident in what they do. But I honestly and truly believe that most all successful entrepreneurs are just eager to learn as much as they possibly can, as quickly as they possibly can. And that's where like the problem solving and things come into, and the gameplay around entrepreneurship is really around the idea of like, I just want to like get better. And I don't really care who teaches me how to get better, as long as like I hear something from somebody and I know it to be true, and I know that that's the right way to go. And so it's fun to talk to other entrepreneurs that are in different industries or that are in different, you know, spaces or spots in entrepreneurship than you are, because everybody has like different things that they've learned that have value.
And I think also the principles are the same. Like the principles of success are the same across the board, is what I've found in the brief time that I've been involved, is like the things that you created, not to backtrack, but the things that you created over this last year, they're guiding principles to any business that wants to be successful. Like if you do these things, it will maybe not guarantee success, but it will definitely help you and get you there faster than if you didn't do these things.
Yeah. And just being around those other entrepreneurs and hearing those hardships and stuff, it's so uncommon that when you're around it, the ego kind of goes out the door, because like you always recognize it, you know, the real, you know, sees real or whatever it is.
Yeah, for
real
sure.
Recognizes real, where you can instantly know when somebody is actually on the path to being a real entrepreneur,
if they're really in it or they're not.
Yeah. Right. And that's something that like, I feel like I've become fairly good at over the last, you know, 8 years or so, is being able to recognize that in people, and, you know, kind of seeing the entrepreneurs to entrepreneurs. And not to say that I think every entrepreneur at some point of their journey is a entrepreneur, you know, and we lie to ourselves that we're better than we are most of the time, because you have to, like I said, you have to have that confidence in who you are. But with that being said, like sometimes the proof just has to outweigh the you know, the want, you know, at the end of the day. Like someone has to be able to go and do those endless nights of work to, you know, earn the right to be like, okay, yeah, like
I get it,
you know, or I'm willing to figure it out. And that problem solving is something that we'll talk about in other podcasts, of just being a vital part of entrepreneurship. It's just that active problem solving. But we're going to end this episode. If you got anything from the episode, you know, please comment and let us know. If this is your first time hearing about us, then I'm glad that you're here. And I hope that you listen all the time. We're hoping to at least put out an episode a week, if not more, just as we get better and better at this. This was, one of our first episodes, and so it's kind of rough, but we'll get better and better at talking and having good questions. And if you have any questions that you want answered or attempted to be answered, just let us know as well.